Next, more questions have emerged about a controversial warehouse built on a site in Milton Keynes. Last week, a BBC Look East investigation revealed a planning officer who was going to reject the plans was taken off the case. Tonight, further concerns about how the council dealt with the planning application. And residents living in bungalows next door say the whole saga has been a nightmare, as Ben Schofield reports.
An early morning call for the neighbours.
It's now 7:14 in the morning and you can hear machinery going on in the background.
In 10 months, residents complained 19 times to the council's Environmental Health Department, but according to a Freedom of Information response, environmental health officers never visited the site, nor did they issue formal warnings to the builders.
While it was being built, it was horrendous. So especially the demolition. My husband's asthmatic, so we had to keep all of the windows closed. The noise level has been terrible. On a pollution level has been awful.
The council says construction sites can be noisy and that it raised the complaints with the builders. But today, more questions about how the council dealt with the planning application. When councillors approved the plans, they imposed 23 conditions. But when formal permission was sent to the developer, 13 were missing. We've seen evidence that council officers knew about the error within weeks, but didn't tell senior colleagues. This statement written by the council's Director of Growth and Economy, Tracy Dark. She says the first she knew about the missing conditions was 8 months after the planning permission was granted, and that prompted her to have urgent discussions with the legal team. But this document also reveals that the planning case officer knew about them within weeks. She discussed them on email with the chief planner and with the developer, but apparently never mentioned them to senior staff. The first time they knew was when mature trees, supposed to be protected by the missing conditions, were chopped down. The council started an external review into this and other aspects of the planning process.
This is the biggest mistake that I've seen or been involved with in my 12 years as a councillor.
John Bint chairs MK's planning committee.
Either this was a very odd one-off behaviour by an individual officer, or it was part of the culture of the department that you don't reveal those things to councillors, residents and management. Whichever of those it was, it shouldn't have happened. We have to get to the bottom of what happened and why.
We've not been able to talk to the planning case officer. The developer says it takes compliance with the planning system very seriously, that it met relevant construction noise regulations, and that it's always behaved appropriately in its dealings with the council.
Well, Ben's with me now. Wow, it seems we're looking at a lot of issues surrounding this warehouse now, aren't we?
Well, yes, and just to recap, last week we reported how emails had shown that a senior planning officer who was first looking at this case and who was minded or was considering refusing planning permission was taken off the case with just 7 weeks to go until councillors were due to discuss it. Now we hear that the planning officer who replaced him knew, or apparently knew, about these missing conditions and then didn't tell senior colleagues beyond the chief planner in the council. Now, the developer says it didn't ask for the change in personnel and hasn't done anything wrong in its dealings with the council. Milton Keynes Council tell us that its external review will look at all of the questions that we are raising about this warehouse planning application. So can people have faith in the local planning process then? Well, the leader of the council, Peter Marland, told us last week on air that he has faith in the planning system. John Bint, the chair of the planning committee, who you saw in my film, he said that lessons are being learned and he's trying to rebuild trust. But he also told me that the warehouse project isn't the only planning application that he has concerns about, that there's a big handful, as he put it, that need to be re-examined. Meanwhile, of course, residents are left with this big warehouse right up against their back gardens.
Thank you very much, Ben.